Look closely. Really closely. Deep into the eyes of a child. See their hope. And ours too. Whoever she is, wherever he lives, every child deserves a childhood. That's why UNICEF is there, for each and every child. Working day in, day out, in 190 countries and territories, reaching the hardest to reach, the furthest from help. It's why we stay to the end and never give up. Will you stand with us?
Stand with us. Stand with us. Stand with us.
For every child.
So hello, everybody. Nice to see everyone again. I haven't been here in about 3 years because I've been rather busy dealing with and supporting what we've had to do around the world. And happy Women's Day, if it hasn't been said already. Those matter to us. And I don't know if people know, we have about 600 million adolescent girls around the world that we're trying to keep in schools that often get taken out of schools much earlier than they should in most of South Asia and most other parts of the world. That's a very important part of our program. Over the last couple, well, as everybody knows, there's been involved in COVID, right? But over the last couple of years, UNICEF's been pretty much at the forefront of driving vaccine initiatives around the world in the developing world. While the developed world had easy access to vaccine, the developing world did not. And so we were able to raise about $1.6 billion and send vaccines to those countries. We vaccinated about half of the world's children, which were mainly in the developing world. And we were able to provide about PPE to about 2.8 million healthcare workers in those countries as well. And of course, as soon as we were coming out of that, and this region knows it better than anyone, Ukraine war breaks out. And Ukraine war, we've now had to open up additional offices to support the refugee crisis there. I know the numbers in Poland are well over 2 million refugees. In Hungary, there are over 1 million refugees. So we've actually, for the first time, I think ever, had to open up offices in this part of the world. We've opened offices, we have an office in Hungary, but we opened a programmatic office in Hungary to support refugees there. They have 1 million. We opened offices also in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and we opened one in Poland. Our largest office is here, actually. And of course, the GSSC, My Global Shared Services Center, is helping get those offices started. We actually lend staff to them to get them started up. We're supporting them also remotely as well. And people may not realize, I said this the last time I was here, but I have to say it again, that actually UNICEF wouldn't be here without a Polish doctor. It was a doctor from Poland in 1943 who made the point that while UNICEF at that time, we were taking care of basically orphans out of World War II. And he said, well, why don't you make this an organization that should serve the entire world? So he advocated for that, and in 1946 we were born. So our roots are Polish, if anybody wants to know. As Liam Neeson said, we're in about 190 countries and territories. But we have about 300 to 400 offices, actually, because in each of those countries, we are often in the subnational region. So in Afghanistan, for example, while everyone was leaving Afghanistan, UNICEF stayed in Afghanistan. And not only are we in Kabul, we're in Kandahar, we're in all of the provincial areas, so we're in very difficult conditions. Actually, Carl, one of my colleagues and myself went to Kabul. That was actually pleasant. You stay in a compound. Yes, there's bombings outside the compound, but you're pretty protected on the compound. But you go to Kandahar, and you live in a 20-foot container. And that's something to do when you're doing that day in and day out. So we live in pretty harsh conditions, right? And so I joined the organization in 1992. hard to believe, 30 years. It's one of those things, you join UNICEF, you just can never leave it once you're inside that organization. But one of the things that I like about the organization is always trying to continue to improve itself. So this idea that shared centers are, oh, that's all about cost savings in private sector, well, that's just as important to the public sector as it is to the private sector. We have to make sure that every dollar that we raise from you, and thank you all for donating to UNICEF, we have to make sure that money gets to the programs, gets to the children in the field. And the only way to do that is to make us much more efficient. But in 1992, when I joined, we were about a $650 million organization, and probably 2/3 of the money that we were raising, we could use for whatever we like to use it for, whether it was emergency response, et cetera. We had a lot of flexibility in the funding back then, and we could use it to support our programs. However, as every year went by, the donors said to us, well, we're not going to give you money for that. We want you to do this program in this country, at that project, in this way. And by the way, we're not going to give you any money for staff. Give money, make sure it goes to the children, but no money to support the actual implementation. And by about 2012, we realized this was not working for us, right? We basically, our regular resources kept dropping. It was down around 20%. And at that time, I was fortunate enough to make a play for why don't we have a global shared services center. And by doing that, we could reduce the costs and we could consolidate a lot of the work that was going on in countries and relieve time for them. So I led the project to be able to convince this organization to do that. That was not easy to do. We did a business case. We did 2 or 3 of them, actually, before we finally convinced them. But one of the things I always tell people is that don't do the business case and then try to sell it to the organization. If you do a business case, involve the organization. So it took about 12 months. We dealt with all the impacted staff, et cetera, and we finally made the decision to do that. We could have put that anywhere in the world. So we went around the world. I remember traveling to Southeast Asia, Central Europe, et cetera. And then Hungary gave it. We had the best offer, and actually the best, I think it was still the best decision, actually, to put it in Budapest. No regrets. Talent is fantastic, as others would attest to, and very hardworking, dedicated staff. So even if you're in the public sector, you're still driven by this efficiency private sector. And we right at the very beginning, we put in place very much performance metrics, SLA metrics, all of you have, customer satisfaction metrics, but also kind of a culture of continuous improvement. Everybody has an opportunity to come up with a new idea, suggest something, improve it, et cetera. And the only way we would have survived, because when I started it in 2016, we were about $4 billion organization. By last year, after about 5 or 6 years, we were almost triple, 11 billion, and I was not going up in staff count. So the only way to do that was keep simplifying, keep driving efficiency, the robotics, automation, all of that, and we were able to absorb quite a bit. So last year, I mean, as of now, we have about 400 staff, 2/3 women. I do have multiple nationalities because we're in the EU, so I actually have about 40 nationalities working in the center. We have about 2/3 of the staff we hire locally in Europe, and about, well, I would say maybe 3/4 of the staff we hire locally, about 1/4 come in. So it's a truly international environment that we work in there. But the complexity of what we're doing is increasing, like with everyone else. So the number of emergency countries that UNICEF was supporting last year tripled. The amount of money also tripled. So basically, we went from revenue in 2016 for about 4 billion to 11 billion. Our transactions for those countries, that's about 50% of the transactions go to emergency countries. We have accelerated service levels for them. So it puts a lot of demand on us to be able to support them. So now we have to do what some of you are already doing, which is take us now to the next step, to be a global business services. But what I've been able to do, because I'm lucky enough to report to the senior, like I don't report to a controller or a director of HR. I have those functions, right? So I'm responsible for HR, onboarding, offboarding, life cycle management of staff member. I'm responsible, of course, for all invoice processing and payments and master data management, customer care, IT. But because I've been able to report to the senior management, I'm able now to position the center to drive modernization of the entire organization, not just of the center itself. And so what we're doing now is we're saying, look, why don't we take everything we've learned, how can we take those to the countries? The countries are really underwater. The money is going up, they have to spend it. The donors are saying, spend it faster, spend it in this way. How can we help them? Like others, we'll take some more work away from them, so we'll centralize more of the work. We've learned from COVID that there's a lot more that we thought was location dependent that's not really location dependent, so that can be done, so we'll start doing that. But the biggest thing for me is to start to go out to those offices and help them work kind of smarter, more efficiently, and allow them to free time up for themselves. So we're starting those processes where we have a whole group of lean experts that will help them. We're using data analytics to drive behavior change, AI, automation, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. With the staff that we have, we're doing many of the things that other people are doing, but one of the favorite things we have is that we take the high performers and we send them out on a mission to those country offices for a month. They get to learn the organization. It's very popular for them. It's a great incentive for them. And many of the staff that we've hired locally in Hungary have now gotten jobs in other parts of the world, some in New York, some in Africa, Asia, et cetera. So it has become a great, I think we call it talent pipeline for the rest of the organization. So we're doing that. So we want to be a catalyst of change, drive upstream improvement, remove burden from the offices, and more importantly, to allow them to focus on the mission. I want to say when we were doing the business case, we had 4 drivers, like everybody, reduce costs, let's say improve quality, reduce risk, but the real winner was releasing that time for the staff to focus on the mission and to focus on children. So we can all make the world a better place. I want to thank everyone who has supported UNICEF. Please continue to do so. And let's do it together, make the world a better place for our children and for the next generation. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer.
Well, how about just a comment? I'm almost starting to cry watching the video. Wow,
That
good.
was the idea.
Wow, powerful, really, very strong.
Oh, thanks.
Great, thank you very much. We'll see you
Thank
again tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.